some people don't have privilege when you basically just said that trans people aren't valid. They're not a thing. They're just girls pretending to be boys or boys pretending to be girls.
Okay.
Like, okay.
Oh, someone's excited. Okay.
Sex is biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So.
It's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society. It's
Okay. No, it is not in the mind. Okay, you're not a man if you think you're a man. And I didn't say pretending, or if I did, I shouldn't have said pretending. Let me amend.
You said playing.
Okay, I said a boy who thinks he's a girl. That's the usual phraseology I use. Not playing. I usually say a boy who thinks he's a girl or a girl who thinks he's a boy, which is technically what we're talking about here. As far as the actual psychological issues at play, it used to be called gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. Now they call it gender dysphoria. The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. Okay, and I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be. You're still a human being, and you're a human being with an issue that I wish you Godspeed in dealing with in whatever way you see fit. But if you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no. My answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
Okay, but you're still saying these kids should not be accepted because they don't really fit in either place? They can't just
I'm saying that the Boy Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout. You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Where's that written, though? Okay.
In the name Boy Scouts. Because this is a very because for all of human history, boy meant boy and girl meant girl. Boy did not mean girl.
People are very more things like culture.
And if I call you a moose, are you suddenly a moose? Okay, if I redefine our terms. No, yes, that's right. Men and women are a completely different thing. This is true. Have you ever met a man or a woman? They're completely different.
Completely different thing. You can't just say you're a cat. It's not a thing. It's genders. It's not saying you're.
Okay, why is that? I don't understand. Why? Okay, let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are. Okay, because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22, so I'm probably young and naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60? Why aren't you 60?
Because
And why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
it's not the same as gender. You can't just.
You're right. Age is significantly less important than gender. You can't magically change your gender. You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change your age.
So what is your formal education background? Because I guess a lot of people don't know what your undergraduate degree was in.
So I was at UCLA in political science and then Harvard Law School.
Okay. So you don't have, you wouldn't consider yourself an expert in sociology?
I don't consider sociology a particularly expert field, but go ahead. I think I'm able to read a sociological study.
Study, but so you're not necessarily an expert.
Yes, there are lots of fields of study.
Right. Well, what I'm getting at is there's a lot of topics.
Let's put it this way: I know a lot less about welding than I do about sociology.
What I'm getting at is that you're not considered an expert in sociology, psychology, gender studies, lesbian dance theory, many of these things that you've brought up tonight.
I know a lot more about all those others than lesbian dance theory. As far as, if you want to take issue with the argument, I would urge you not to use the argument from authority, which is somebody has a PhD by their name, they know what they're talking about. That's a dumb argument.
What I'm trying to get at is that the fact that you have any other further education in any of these topics or any of these fields of study.
I don't need a 7-year degree in sociology to know bullshit when I hear it.
And granted, that's your opinion.
Right, because I'm here, yeah, giving it.
They're also offering kind of an unqualified opinion on a lot of these topics.
See, again, you're just making the argument from authority. I don't think slapping a PhD from Ferris State next to your name makes you an expert in all things in the field in which you propose to speak. Okay, the fact is that either my argument's good or my argument's bad. Citing to my credentials is a really bad way of making an argument. It's like it's actually the equivalent of, it's so funny, when people do this, it's the equivalent of actually a religious person saying, citing to the Bible for an argument. I'm a very religious person, right? I mean, see this? It's the yarmulke, okay? I'm a religious person, okay? I never cite to the Bible. The reason I don't cite to the Bible is because that's an argument from authority. Okay, you may not believe the authority to which I'm citing. I don't believe the authority to which you're citing. So you're going to have to make me an argument as to what I'm saying that's wrong instead of just saying I don't have the properly enumerated degree from the institution of your choice.
You noted that Western civilization was built upon Judaism or Judeo-Christian values. But would you concede that other civilizations, such as the Islamic civilization, especially during its golden age, and Chinese civilization and Indian civilization, which were very economically successful as late as the 17th and 18th century, would you concede that their failure ultimately stems from Western imperialism and the exploitation of these regions, which were successful prior to the West conquering and then exploiting them for their raw materials?
No. So no, historically, I would not concede that. So the Islamic world didn't fail because the West was involved with the Islamic world. The Islamic world failed because it fell into fundamentalism. Between 800 and 1400, as you know, the Islamic world was responsible for the preservation of a lot of the Greek literature that I'm very fond of. It was intellectually thriving. There was economic growth. It was an attempt to balance fundamental principles and reason. And then Islam fell into a form of fundamentalism that tried to rule out reason in favor of theocracy, and that has continued, unfortunately, until today. As far as the failure of economic growth in places like China, China was successful as a mercantilist state in the same way that some Western countries were successful as mercantilist states. But what has made the world different is not mercantilist states. What has made the world different is a fundamental recognition of the alienability of individual human labor, and that is what has allowed the West to grow beyond China. So China is still a very powerful country, economically speaking, but it has not embraced the principle of individual human liberty still, and that's a serious problem. So I don't think that imperialism can really explain the failures of other civilizations to grow beyond a certain point or stagnation at a certain point. I think that's putting a little bit too much, historically speaking, not enough on the civilizations themselves, and too much on military conquest how long did the military conquest of China last? China was in control of its own fate before and after. So the conquest of China, including of Hong Kong, lasted, approximately 100 years? 130 years?
Mainland China, roughly up until 1949, when the Maoists took over Hong Kong,
right,
until 1997.
And by the way, Hong Kong was the most successful economic area of China. Right, which is so if we're talking about economic stagnation, Hong Kong's actually a terrible example. It's a great example of how adopting Western values in cultures that were not originally Western has led to massive economic growth. It's also true of free markets in Singapore and in South Korea and in every other place that has adopted Western values with regard to free markets and property ownership. So the conquest of those areas may be unjustifiable on an imperialist level, but from an economic growth standpoint, it was very good for Hong Kong that Hong Kong was conquered by the West, just in pure GDP growth terms. As far as the conquest of China, you're right. From the Opium Wars, which began, the 1850s, until about 1949, so about a 100-year gap right there. That is not what leads China to be a laggard in terms of economic growth. It certainly is not what leads China to be a laggard in terms of human freedom. There was a great lack of human freedom in China, far beyond the West, in leading up to Western imperialism and then following Western imperialism. So the question is, the expansion of Western values, are those good for countries or bad for countries? That's not a justification of imperialism, which can in fact lead to the subjugation of peoples, obviously. But I'm loath to blame every problem in every part of the developing world on Western imperialism when I don't think the record quite bears that out. Is that fair?